everyone. This is John Nobbs, and
this is Eric Berryman.
And we're going to talk a bit more about the FSAK. Eric's just done a 4-day workshop with us.
Yeah, 4, 5 days.
All sorts of stuff. So he's got a few questions. I might have a few questions of him. So.
Yes. So your method comes from the Suzuki method of actor training.
Very much so.
Correct. How or when did you first decide or realize that you were going to branch off and kind of add your own exercises and your own theories and yeah?
Well, I guess when I first came back from working with Suzuki back in '92, we started doing the training. Jacqui was looking for a system where she could get a group of actors together that was coherent and had the sort of common culture which the training had. And I guess coming from the dance world, where we had lots of experiences with different styles of dance, different types of exercises, which did different things for different parts of the body, we thought, well, let's try and do the same thing. So we invented our own exercises, sort of quite different from Suzuki's, but we found very quickly that actually he seems to cover all the bases. So we went back to going to his exercise and then adapting those rather than actually making up our own.
Right.
When I worked with Suzuki in '94, '95, this was for 4 months as a guest artist, I saw him being quite free and liberal with the way he used his own training, and he was quite free to adapt exercises, put different music on and things like that. So I saw that he was doing that, so I thought there's no reason why I shouldn't have a go at that myself. So one of the exercises we can show you is I Put a Spell on You by Scrooge Hawkins, and that was actually our first breakout exercise. I thought, well, let's just see what happens when you do something different to the same stuff.
Yes. Now, what about that particular exercise, as I Put a Spell on You? Why did you feel a necessity to create that? Like, what did it have that maybe something else did not have?
Well, we looked at Suzuki's the basic training method, which is fairly, shall we say, austere, and then we realised that Suzuki himself actually adds different things when he's doing a rehearsal process. And we felt in order to do that, to provide a similar thing for actors who might be visiting, starting off with us, we should not only provide with the sort of the core business, so to speak, the grounding, the basics and the coherence between the body and voice, but perhaps we needed to add these other improvisatory elements, which add the colour and light and shade and the various things that you do as normal course in terms of acting. So we thought we should provide that in the same experience rather than have that as outside the experience.
Yes.
So we just really planted that inside the Suzuki method. So those adaptations that you saw in the last 2 days are all really basics plus.
Right. And that plus level, just from the past few days of working with you guys, you said that Suzuki's own company has he has training that he does, and then he goes into rehearsal. And in rehearsal, something else. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between training and rehearsal? And
well, he would just take those exercises, and then when he does a rehearsal, he would actually make them do statues as part of the rehearsal process, in terms of acquainting themselves more profoundly with the actual speech themselves. So he would actually use those things like statues specifically to actually give them that extra sort of improvisation, the sort of the colour movement that might not exist in the actual method itself.
Right. So you've in a sense taken training and rehearsal and kind of
put them together, and especially also put them in. One of the things that we all know, Suzuki's very good for grounding. It's very good for the coherence between the body and the voice. We all know that, and to make a fairly powerful, adaptable voice. But most people in the West think it stops there, I suppose, and we say, well, no, let's add all the things you might do to put some Stanislavski into the training. So those exercises you've done, where we sort of off the wall with the teddy bears.
Yes.
They could say that Stanislavski being planted inside the same experience rather than sort of going outside that to do the Stanislavski or the other. Light and shade, the colour, the emotion, the psychology.
Yes. There's sometimes in your exercises you have, obviously there's a lot of speaking that goes on within these forms, these structures. Sometimes have created these exercises in which you speak from one extreme to the other, and then there's some middle ground of speaking that you try to get at. Can you explain kind of how you developed that and how you discovered that, you know, this kind of play with speaking?
Full voice, quiet voice, super quiet whisper. Is that what you're talking about?
No. Well, sometimes you can do things. For instance, you have these exercises with these bears, these, you know, inanimate objects, these teddy bears, and you may say something as if speak this speech as you normally would, which is one area. Then you go to an opposite end of the spectrum and say, now speak it as if you're the teddy bear. You know, whatever voice comes out, it can be as wild and wacky. And then you'll say, now combine the two, and where's this middle ground? And I think it's a fascinating exploration. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, well, I got the idea, funnily enough. I was working with a group of men, and they were a very varied group in the sense some had extensive acting experience and some had none at all. And we're doing this thing called the Brotherhood of the Sacrificial Anode. And we had this sequence. I said, oh, come on, I want you to come on stage, and I want you to sort of crawl over it and bring these teddy bears on with you. And then I got them to actually sort of change the diapers on the teddy bears, so to speak. So they were doing this thing of sort of changing the baby, and then there's sort of this baby talking. I said, now talk as though, you know, mine's got to be a lawyer, you know, mine's got to be a doctor. One of those sort of badinage between men and what their children are going to turn into. And what I found, which was fascinating, was just how easily the men did it. There was just no barrier for them to actually engage in this emotional relationship with this teddy bear. And I came to the realisation, I suppose, because teddy bears really mean a lot in terms of our childhood. And most of us, our childhood, could go back to some form of soft toy, which was our special friend, and we spoke to with their own language, and all those sorts of mythical experiences of childhood. And so I thought, well, maybe the teddy bear can access that part of the persona very, very easily.
Right.
So as I developed the exercise, we've done it in many parts of the world, and as I said to you the other day, we've done it in Nepal with Nepalese villages. Really, not these aren't actors; these are just ordinary villages.
Right.
And of course, I've done it with young Americans in Seattle and all sorts of places. And what I found is you have exactly the same response. So this is something that's almost universal, almost universal. And then I realised that maybe the teddy bear can sort of be shall we say, the spokesperson for your own sort of unconscious emotional world, as it were.
Yeah.
And so, on the one hand, you have your adult life, your sort of serious, factual, practical attitude, and then on the other hand, you have this imaginative world, this world of the imagination. And I realised possibly the teddy bear could access that, and then I thought, well, okay, what probably is interesting is actually just marry the two together. You probably end up with a pretty unique voice, and as you probably found, you do your full sort of I am Eric speaking, and then you have a strange teddy bear speaking, and then when you bring the two together, you actually end up with sort of a unique vocal experience, which you've probably never even thought of before. I certainly found that, and most of our actors find that.
Yes.
They actually go, wow, I didn't think I could speak like that.
Yeah.
And what it's done, I suppose, is the empathy with this thing called the bear, this talking you get with the bear, means that you actually your rational egotistical mind becomes devolved into a sort of secondary or sort of less important state where it becomes a witness.
Yes.
And then the primary state becomes the actual unconscious or the dream world, and that's actually what we're all trying to get anyway in terms of our acting, because that's what acting space is really about.
Right.
And the teddy bear just is one of the tools we use to get us to that place. And of course, eventually you take the teddy bear away, and you can actually have that connection with your own inner world.
Yeah.
I was teaching a group of young actors in Seattle, and the director of the company, who was a very non-physical person, as he told me, and he had sort of bad feet, he said, and so he did the training like anybody else, but at one stage I was doing the stomp, and I said, okay, I want you to hold the teddy bear in such a way as the teddy bear's observing you stomp. And he had this amazing revelation, because he felt the teddy bear was saying, oh, that was a good part, oh, that wasn't so good, oh, you should have been a bit more like this. So the teddy bear became his alter ego, which then could actually address his stomp. And so he felt this other person was helping him do it, and a private person, really.
Right.
And that gave me this insight into the bifurcated nature of the sort of teddy bears, the psychology of a teddy bear, really.
Yes.
And that's why I guess became even more interested in how that was, applied in different ways.
Right.
And I think that, like I say, teddy bear does access your own personal mythology, I believe. And so
Yes.
and you actually can see it. As soon as you put a teddy bear in front of them, they look at it, their whole eyes change, the whole visage,
Yes.
the face just changes, and you would have felt it. You can see
Becomes
what it
alive.
feels. It becomes alive in a different way, and it's a very it's non-judgmental way.
Mm-hmm.
Like most of us are having problems all the time in our acting with, I should have done this, I should have been like that, all those things, and that's our ego saying, well, you should have. Of course, not only is that not meaningful, because the audience couldn't care less what your ego wants, but it's actually very, very negative and tends to depreciate your performance rather than actually enhance it. So I think you're always looking for ways to get the ego out of the way, so it sits there and sort of sit down there, witness and tell me later on. So
Right.
I think that's what the teddy bear helps, because it just gets you that space. And the whole point about that exercise is totally instinctive. Just speak like a teddy bear. Don't think I should have a self, but just go straight for it.
Right.
And
whatever
then,
that means.
whatever that might mean. And
Yeah.
of course, if that's instinctive, that's an honest, completely honest response. And we always stipulate that whatever you're trying to do is you keep that teddy bear voice. So don't let it wander off whatever you've selected.
Right.
And then A, it's become naturally out of your own soul, I suppose. And B, as you sort of keep it more and more, you actually start to own that experience. And that becomes part of your library, as it were, your various voices, which you can then draw on at some later stage.
You mentioned the term personal mythology. Can you explain exactly what you mean by that?
Well, I mean, this is one of the words I use which don't have any sort of sense of absolute meaning, but just imply a different attitude to your own, your own soulscape, your own emotional landscape, I suppose. And so it's not a word that actually has some sort of perfect absolute thing. It's just more of a generational, a shift in the way you think about yourself. So if I say personal mythology, well, of course, you're thinking, well, what does that mean? But it means it's a mystery, and it's something that's to do with a mystery that's actually about Eric, not about other people, but about Eric's mystery. And of course, it implies knowledge and mystery at the same time, I suppose. And it's, well, I mean, what did you think when I said it to you?
A bevy of things. In one instance, personal mythology, I thought, well, does that mean that I have this ancient history that I need to bring to the text or to the work? Or because there was one exercise where, we had to say the speech with a kind of a shaking vibrato kind of effect, and then taking it away, but seeing if we could if we could keep the sense that we had just come from a vibration or this effect, that there was a history that came before this normal speech. So I kind of started I said, well, maybe that's a part of personal mythology.
Yeah.
There's some type of, that's your own, I'm bringing my own given circumstances, if you will.
Absolutely.
In that sense, and I thought it could mean, like you said, mysterious or personal myth. That I possess, I'm mythic. I am there's something about me, I could possess that, I could be Achilles or something.
Yeah.
Or, something. I don't know. It was
That's a very open-ended. It's an
Yeah,
open-ended
it
description.
is.
And of
It
course,
is.
And no matter which way you take that, it has to add to your persona in terms of your performative persona, doesn't it? The idea that you've got this other thing apart from just you, there's an other story, there's more stuff out there that I can just channel, and it doesn't matter how you channel it. So these are open-ended questions, really, just a different sort of, okay, well, I just make myself available to something that might mean. And of course, you can choose, well, 4 or 5, 6 zones of that, any one of which is valid at any one time, and all of them are valid, really.
Yeah.
And we're all looking for ways to access that type of mysterious quality, because that's actually what makes us interesting as performers. Not the facts, not the words we speak, but actually this other thing behind it. And when you hear someone like Judy Garland sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, she's singing the same notes as everyone else, but there's just something different about her.
Right.
And you think, well, there's something there, there's a mystery about her, and that's what makes her so compelling. And there's probably various aspects to that.
Right.
But essentially, you go, well, how come she does the same as everybody else, and yet that's amazing, and the others are sort of okay?
Right.
And I think it's because of those mysterious things which us ordinary people can probably access to take us to those sorts of places which those genii can sort of do without even thinking. And think that's the job of an actor, really, to just this dialectic between the mystery and the knowledge. You've got to have knowledge, you've got to be able to say the words, you've got to be able to stand up, you've got to be able to stand still and not fall over and be in the light and do what the director says. But there's also this other thing which is what really compels the audience, because the audience goes, well, he's doing the same as that, but that's amazing. What's he doing? There's something there. There's that funny little thing that he's just something, and it's always about the other, isn't it? The other thing they're doing which makes them interesting, not the thing, but the opposite stuff.
Right.
And so we posit that you've got to really, that's what you've got to think about. You know, the facts will take care of themselves. To be or not to be, that is the question. That'll take care of itself. But the space between to and be, that's the interesting thing, isn't it, really? That's the thing that makes it interesting, not the words, but the space between the words and those thoughts that happen. So, of course, you could say that the to be or not to be, those words are the sort of the landscape or the arena, but actually the stuff that happens inside that's what makes them compelling.
And how... So in that case, would you say that most of your exercises are designed to get that space in between?
Absolutely, yeah. The space in between, that's a very good way to put it.
Yeah.
The space between sort of now and then, the space between this and that, the space between male and female, the space between old and young.
Right.
And these are conceptions that your rational mind can't deal with. It's like you're either black or white. You know, you can't be sort of in the middle.
Right.
You know,
so
you can't be.
Right.
And so, but your unconscious mind, that's your dreamscape, your what Jung called the unconscious mind, what you could easily call your imagination, can deal with those things because it's not bound by the same sort of strictures of time and space as conscious mind is. Conscious mind is always trying to work things out. You know, what time's the bus leave? Oh, what's you know, all that stuff, and they're facts. And you've got to deal with that, otherwise you can't do that. But if you sit in front of a beautiful painting, are you there for 5 minutes or 5 hours?
Right,
you know,
right.
That's the zone where your time and spacing have just morphed into this completely undifferentiated space. We know it's there, and you've been there for a time, but how long?
Right.
And of course, in that time that you're sitting in front of this beautiful painting, what happens to you? You go these amazing journeys of imagination. And that's the space that really I think the audience wants to go to. That's why they pay their money. And it's the job of the actor and the director and all the various aspects of the performance to actually provide that situation where the audience can take that thing. And that's, you know, it's very easy done with music, of course, because music just does it naturally. But how do we get to that space with acting that songs create?
Yeah.
And generally it means that the ego, your rational mind, it can't be denied. You can't pretend it's not there, but it cannot dominate the experience.
Right.
It's got to be given a secondary experience which just sits down, sits in the corner, shut up, watch this for a while, and tell me later on. And that's what happens. You'll find that, I'm sure it's happened to you in the last few days, or what, indeed any time, but somebody you'll be trotting on back home, you're walking down the street, going to the shop, and going, hey, that's what that was.
Yeah.
I mean, has that happened to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, the other day, you know, something occurred to me where I think, you know, in one of the exercises, I realized that I was both in the present moment of the exercise, doing the task, you know, in the moment of it, but at the exact same time, I was in the past of the exercise, commenting on my feet position and my hips, and you know, so I was in the past trying to evaluate and analyze what I was doing, in the present moment doing the thing, and then I was in the future trying to say, okay, how do I, from the analysis in the present moment, not do, or how do I consistently keep doing this, or do I fix it or make it better, all in the same moment. That's then for a second my mind went, it's not possible to do this. It's not possible to...
Well, that's your rational one saying it's not possible.
Right. And then some part of me said, no, it is, because I'm doing it.
That's right.
And I just let it kind of be.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, even if you weren't, I mean, how well you're doing it's not really important. The point is you actually are in a zone where those things are all potentials.
Right.
And that's what really counts.
Right.
Whether it's true or not. So once again, we're not talking about absolutes. We don't prove something.
Yeah.
We're saying, this is a way of thinking about what I should be doing. And what you've done is you allowed your mind to be in the space between, you know, practical or rational and unconscious. You're actually occupying that space. And it's extremely pleasurable to be in because it's very enjoyable because
Yeah.
you're no longer worried about whether you're doing a good job or not, whether you're sort of a good actor. You don't care about that because you're having a pretty amazing experience. And of course, you're also saying to the audience, well, please share my experience and tell me later on what you think.
Right.
And of course, that if you get into that zone, instead of a lot of acting can be sort of doing clever things and sort of talented things and just pausing here because it gets a good gag and those sorts of things. Well, that whole idea of pleasing the audience and hoping they like you and hoping to be sort of regarded as a really great actor, they just aren't important anymore because you're actually just doing this thing and I'm really having a good time and I'm really enjoying it. I'm hoping you are too.
Right.
And it's so that's a technique like anything.
Yeah.
And our exercise designed one with sort of the format in which to do it. So you've got this sort of 10 tech 10, which I imagine you're probably in that 10 tech 10 exercise, which you can show you now. But at the same time, all those tools, like the mirror, gives you this idea, doesn't it? Maybe that's the go to the idea.
Yeah.
Tell me about that, because you said something when we did that first mirror exercise, which we're showing you now. You said something about not only you're aware of the audience, but you're aware of this other thing too. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, it's so while having these mirrors where one person is watching the other in the mirror while you're both kind of going on this slow walk journey, this journey, something occurred to me that I'm both like I am watching my partner, but I'm being watched at the exact same time.
Yeah, by another watcher.
By like another, and then it just
so you're the hunter and the hunted, so to speak. You're both these things.
Well, it also became a thing where because the mirror is totally on, them, and my focus is there, I really can't see me in the mirror. So it's almost as if I'm there, but I'm not there.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That I've kind of objectively kind of stepped out, and am now watching the whole of us.
That's right. Well, that's very true. But at the same time, you've got to keep the mirror still because the mirror's got to move as you. So of course you haven't really stepped out at all.
No.
You've just got the sense that you have, but you're still very much present as well.
Yeah.
So, and these are all those incredible paradoxes, aren't they? Self and role, be third person and first person. Cause
yes.
To be in a performance, you can't be totally first person because if you're not aware of other things like your partners or where the lights are, where the sounds are at the right time, you have to be aware of those things.
Yeah.
And of course, our conscious mind says, "Oh, I've got to play the music. No, I should be." It's always, but our unconscious mind says, "Oh, well, let's just join all these things together." So I'm incredibly involved with you at the same time. I'm aware that the audience is watching me and things like that.
Right.
And they're sort of, once again, it's an attitude really, a creative attitude rather than some sort of truth. And the fact that what happened was we set up this exercise and we don't say anything about this mirror stuff, we just say do it.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you're doing this stuff and you're going, wow, this is amazing, I'm having this incredible experience even though I'm just obeying a series of rules, which is walking along and making sure I can actually see this person all the time. And then suddenly you have these thoughts come to you because you've got this very clear, one of the reasons I suppose is because you're rational, it's very clear thinking, I've got to keep the mirror still, I've got to keep the mirror still, I've got to keep the mirror still, otherwise their image becomes corrupted and becomes hard to watch. That's a very clear directive, really, isn't it? But at the same time, is that you find that these things happen to you.
Right.
These thoughts come to you. Actually, where do they come from? They come from you.
Yeah.
They come from you. They're outside of your, I would say, your personal mythology, if you like, and whatever that might mean. They come to you, and you suddenly have these thoughts, and of course, the fact that you're having a thought makes you pretty compelling to watch.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what's he doing? Something amazing is going on there, and that's what we believe. The audience is actually compelled to watch people while they're doing those very interesting things.
Yes.
It becomes quite a simple game plan, really.
Yeah, and I think that the nature of having such a clear form or structure for something like this slow 10 take 10 mirror thing is that I think it allows, if you allow it to happen, I think it allows freedom and creativity and these ideas to kind of come about. It's definitely my personal belief that you need a framework or a structure than to have freedom in. You know, because if there's no structure or no framework there, well, then that's not freedom. It's really just chaos.
That's right.
You know, it's there's no direction, you know, to it. But once there's and I think that's the benefit with both. I think the pure form of the Suzuki exercises and both your additions and adaptations is that both of them possess a very clear cut structure in which to have a life inside of. You know. Because it's also one of those things where, like, if you get lost, you can go back to the structure of it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, I'm lost. Oh, wait, still mirror. This, I know this. And then once that happens, it's kind of like you've built the house back up. Yeah, now you can live in it again.
That's right. You put yourself on track again.
You know.
Exactly. And of course, the thing is, the mirror becomes so clear when you make it, or if it's not working, it's pretty obvious to you. So it doesn't matter what level of your experience is, your level of facility or talent.
Yes.
You can still very clearly work. Oh, I've got to keep this still. So, of course, this responsibility does actually makes your performance much stronger anyway.
Right.
And of course, we call build your core business, core body strength.
Now, you were the past few years, you and some other top teachers and practitioners involved with the Suzuki method were together in Japan, and you guys, from what I understand, were meeting to kind of address the kind of state of things, both the legacy of the work and how it's been perceived over the years, and how you have been, you know, teaching it and using it in your own. Can you just briefly touch on?
Well, there's 7 or 8 people. There's Grabstaita, who's Lithuanian, Annelies Gabold, who's Danish, Sebastian Mattia, who's Italian, Cameron Steele from the States, Ellen Lauren from the States, that's East Coast, I should say, Marcos Martinez, West Coast, Monica Vignal from Argentina, and John Brokering, who's an American academic but lives in Japan, who's fluent in Japanese. He's, I should say, Suzuki's preferred translator at the moment, and myself from Australia. And we were called together, I suppose, because Mrs. Saito, who's Mr. Suzuki's General Secretary, she's recently died, and Suzuki wanted to, I guess, clarify what his legacy should be, especially in terms of the training, not so much his performing aesthetic, but his training and how it should be perceived or how it should be sort of promulgated. And we spent a couple of sessions, and one session in particular, I suppose the session we spent in winter in Toga, we all had a chance to watch each other's teaching system, teaching attitude. So we spent about an hour a day, each day just observing how we all taught, and there was no real critique about what was the right way to teach. We were just interested in how what they talked about, what they were looking for, what they expected from the training and the actors there, and the outcomes they wanted. And John Brokering was the guinea pig. He'd never done the training before, so we all taught him while the others were present and watching. And then out of that, as a form, I suppose, from a closure, they asked us to write an essay about what we thought what the training meant to us. And so there's a booklet out there which hasn't been published officially yet, but we're hoping it will be. It's certainly been translated into Spanish as we speak, and maybe even Danish by Annelies Gabold in Scandinavia. So we're hoping.
But your essay is I think isn't it published on, or is it on your website?
Probably it's on the website as well.
Yeah. So I mean, if I definitely recommend people to read your essay. One of the really great things that resonated with it. Well, the title was the Suzuki method, the one true method of active training.
That's right. I believe it's true.
You know,
I believe
and I feel, you know, I would agree with that in the sense that you place things you were talking about. I mean, you equate the ability of it to something, you know, that actors should use the way a classical ballet, you know, dancer will go and train.
Yes.
Or she has certain, exercises or things that she can do to go back to, or a musician will have scales and things like that.
That's
but
right.
you know, and you make the case that there really doesn't exist a training or a system that actors have in the Western world, at least, to have.
Yeah. Well, part of the reason is there's two reasons. A lot of people, certainly in the West, think of acting as essentially emotion psychology, and not really being trainable in that sense, which I don't think is true, because you still have to be heard and you have to be seen.
Right.
So I think there's a problem in the West. They perceive acting as essentially about sort of improvising and just sort of being emotional, if you like, and being psychological or something. All of which are true, but they tend to be, I would consider they're sort of overlays on what should be a basic thing. So it's the same as saying, I'm a jazz guitarist, but I can't play the notes. Well, these not really. You can't communicate anything in subtle terms if you can't really play the notes.
Right.
So, and the other thing is that I was going to say that people think, because in the terms of Suzuki, they think it's actually a style of acting. That's why it's because it is a training system. They actually think that's a style of acting. This is part of this misunderstanding with emotion and psychology. There was something else too, I've forgotten. But yeah, and oh no, the other problem really with actor training is how do you develop a vocabulary which anybody can do? Because in ballet, of course, you're selected as a ballet dancer really through your genetic structure, whether you've got the requisite hips, feet, with all the elements of the body have to be pretty close to,
right,
80 or 90% of what you're going to get anyway.
Yes.
So of course, some little girl starts doing ballet class at the age of 6. 50 girls start at the age of 16. There's only 2 left because they're the only 2 that really have the right body structure. So of course so your ability to dance has actually been pre-selected, really. But if you look at acting, how do you develop a type of vocabulary which we can all do? So it's you, being Afro-American from the States, and I from Australia, could actually do the same stuff. So the genius of Suzuki's invention of things like Basic 2, the parallel means that anybody can do it. Your grandpa can get up and do this.
Right.
We all know that. We've seen huge variations in the sort of people who can do it. And we've got a young actress who's disabled, and she does the training to the best of her ability. So that's what Suzuki's done. He's found a type of language, a vocabulary, a training vocabulary, which is incredibly inclusive, I should say. Includes anybody who wants to do it. Right. And that's the two things. One, that it's not just about emotion psychology, it's actually about scales and arpeggios, which we all know in music are absolutely mandatory. Yeah. And then to find the type of language which anybody can do, regardless of where they're coming from. Yes. And I spent the essay sort of equating some exercise of Suzuki's number 2 exercise with a basic tondo, which is one of the building blocks of classical ballet, and saying, well, this is why they're universal, and I believe that the Suzuki training is universal too, and we, each of us, and these people, all of us in the symposium, like for instance, Marcos Martinez comes from an Amerindian background, so he uses Navajo flute music instead of the shakuhachi, and he also uses Puerto Rican something for the stomp. So he's taken those universal elements which are in this thing, and has done his version. So of course, that's about him being in New Mexico, and being who he is in New Mexico, not trying to be Japanese. Right. And so I think that was really important to create, by creating a regional variant of ours. We said, well, actually, shows it's universal. In the same way as there's regional variants in all. There's music scales, there's regional variants in the way people use music and stuff. But it's essentially, there are core values there, and they are pretty much absolute and universal.
Also, in your essay, I was really intrigued by, you have this idea of something called a theatrical plasma. Can you?
Well, this is
what
getting,
is this plasma? Where is it?
Well, this is getting up to the idea of the old personal mythology. This is one of these things that, once again, isn't some sort of absolute. It's actually an operational hypothesis. I was performing in Tasmania, one of our works in Tasmania, which is down the south of Australia, and it's beautiful space. There weren't many people in the audience, it was a beautiful space. I actually sort of thought, I can actually talk to the space. I'll talk to the space. And while we were preparing for this, I had this idea that I was playing the devil in this It was an everyman version of everyman, which is the miracle play. So I played the devil, and the devil sort of conducts this person, everyman, through all these trials and tribulations. So I'd come on and do something and go off for a while. So you have one of those players we sort of on and off a fair bit.
Yeah.
And while you're doing stuff, of course, you can think about all sorts of things. So I was thinking, I suddenly thought, what if I could actually project this speech, this idea out there to this, ether above the audience, and then they would actually sort of drink it in, digest it, react to it in the way they would do in terms of individuals and also collectively, and throw it up again, and I could actually feel what that meant.
Right.
And so I could actually use this thing as a sort of generating material. And it sounds a bit wanky, I suppose, but in fact, it's just an interesting way to be even more sensitive to the space and the way the words are being perceived. But actually, this is not what you're talking about, is it? It's another thing.
Yeah, well, there seems the plasma.
I talk about, so in the essay, I talk about the plasma in a slightly different way. That's one version of the plasma. The other version of the plasma is I suddenly realised as I was saying these, we did it the other day, this exercise which is called Hang and Five. And I said something along the lines, it's one of these things where you sort of silly Aussie surfing song, and there's some sort of wipeout where you fall off the board and splash around in the surf and then get back on the board again. And so I said, so that's okay. And then the next time I said, well, what about if a shark bit you?
Right.
So we did this thing with people buying sharks and then da-da-da-da-da. And that was an example of what I call the plasma, where I could actually create a matrix where the audience would, not the audience, the actors would know what they were doing, and they had this very clear thing, they had to be there then and here then. And then, if I wanted to, I could still throw this other stuff in. And I could especially add sort of very elliptical things like shark attacks and stuff like that, which sound really wacky. But in fact, when you say things like that to the actors, suddenly they go, what the hell is he talking about? He's talking about a show. I've got to keep doing what I'm doing. So as they keep doing what they're doing, trying to deal with this sort of eccentric demand, it creates a very different energy in the space.
Yes.
And that's I call that a plasma, and that's a very creative thing, because that's them sort of trying to work out something in real time as they do it without dropping their bundle. And that, I think that creates a frizz on the energy. And I would turn around to you or anybody, that was amazing, wasn't it? You go, yes, that was amazing, something happened.
Right.
And they, we could all feel this difference. Right. And to me, that's a very creative thing. So, I mean, all those exercises that you've done all these last days, which is different from Suzuki's basic ones, have all come from that type of experience. Have all been made from that. And I postulate that really, I think Suzuki himself, who's an incredible choreographer, has taught himself with his own training. So training's not just a matter of developing his actors into very competent performers,
right? But
he's actually used those actors in that training system to actually create his aesthetic shifts.
Right.
I don't know how true that is, but if it's not true, it's a pretty good idea.
Well, no, I think it sounds a very valid idea, especially attitude, especially learning that he is very open to changing and shifting and creating new things, and if when someone does that means they're learning and then building upon what they're learning.
Yeah, and the training itself is a mobile object. It's a movable feast.
Right.
It's not just something fixed in time like a type of cult liturgy or some sort of what they call kata, these sort of rote things. We repeat this, repeat this, repeat this. Well, I've seen him explode it. I've seen him throw the Sex Pistols stuff, music and public image, and some punk stuff.
Yeah.
I've just seen him throw that into the same exercise. These girls be doing these beautiful umbrella exercise, and suddenly they're doing it to the Pistols. So of course that's an incredible different line of dialectic, and so I'm seeing quite happy to sort of really. John Broken has a thing. Apparently on YouTube, there's a guy who does Will It Blend. Yeah. He gets one of these blending things. He throws things like iPods in there, and
to see if it'll
what will happen, and see if it'll blend. And I believe Suzuki does the same sort of thing too. He's always trying stuff out. But you see, the thing is, he's got this very strong basis on which he can do that, because he's got this very clear structure, and he can either throw the stuff in or leave it out. I mean, it doesn't matter. He's not going to get lost. They're not going to get lost. They know what it is they're supposed to be doing. And this is the important thing, this thing I call a matrix.
Yes.
And he can throw the weirdest, most incredibly convoluted things in, or just do it straight. And because he's got that very strong basis, he can afford to throw weird and wacky things in for some time to time. Nearly always he relinquishes them because he finds they don't serve him, you know, in terms of the long term, but he'll always try them out. And I guess you could say the residue of that's in there anyway, isn't it? They've actually done this stuff and they've been augmented by this other stuff. So as far as I can see, it's extremely straightforward and quite practical. And if you watch this training, and if you're watching the training with intent, and if you're watching the training as something that's actually not some fixed form, but as a type of method where the actors are supposed to be pushing their own boundaries each time, I don't think you can help but actually get more creative about, you know, the further implications of it. There's a very clear, straightforward implication about building the actor's skills, but there's this other thing. What happens then? What happens to this other stuff? And I think it's quite clear.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what Suzuki's doing. So why don't we do it too in our own way? And of course, he's quite happily thrown in cultural bits from all over the place, hasn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, most of that music.
Most of the music is not,
It's not
inherently Japanese
no, it's
at
not
all.
At all.
You know. Yeah.
So.
Do you and your theater, OzFrank Theater, has a core company of artists and actors that both train and do productions with. Did you have some type of evaluation or kind of litmus test to kind of bring them into the fold? I know Suzuki, when he auditions, he'll essentially just hold training.
That's what we do.
And
too.
kind of weed them out
Yeah.
through training, you know, or just to kind of see, you know, if...
Well, we believe that training's the culture of the company, in the same way as the training's the culture of a football team, really, or a dance troupe.
Yeah.
The training's essentially their culture. And so, once again, that's the litmus test. That's the only test, really. They do it. If they like that whole idea of doing stuff like this, as you see Chelsea and Alicia doing, and you can actually see them growing. I reckon you can probably see them growing the time you've been here, really. That's all you need. You don't have to worry about people's egos. You don't have to deal with stuff. They understand the etiquette. They understand what the culture means. They've got to do this stuff. And we are obviously very interested in how different people do it differently anyway. So it's not as though they're all robots or all clones.
Right.
Because they can't possibly. One of the things you learn about Suzuki, sometimes got a reputation of sort of, you know, autocratic and militaristic and sort of clone and sort of robots. But the more you do it, the more you realise it's just not possible to do that, because you end up being yourself, as we all know. And so we're quite interested to see how different people are going to do their own stuff. And you've met the people; they're all very different people. They're not of the same sort of psychological bent. But it's the one thing. So you have to train, and the training makes the actors, as you've seen. People like Alicia and Chelsea haven't really done anything else. So if that becomes the metaphor, not the metaphor, the entree, the whole thing. So it's become so clear then, so easy to do, because you're not looking for certain people. Now, what happens, I guess, is that people like sort of Alicia, who's been with us for 4 or 5 years on and off, suddenly she needs a solo role, so she'll be given something that challenges her in a different way than it did before. So that's the process through the company, really. They start off being a member of the course, which is relatively easy and obviously it's not too stressful and it's not too overly demanding. But eventually, as they are there more and more, they'll actually move high up the ranks. So it's a very, very clear hierarchy. The hierarchy is essentially of time done. And you don't have to deal with people's egos and all that sort of confusing sort of stuff you often get in an acting situation. It's about playing with people's egos and juggling people and things like that. It's a clear directive. That's hard work too, so people know they're going to have to do this hard work, and then you can't get out of it. You can't go, I don't need to do that. Everybody has to go through it. And so it becomes a great clearinghouse.
Yeah.
So and you know, it's very good to have this thing. It's a very clear directive, and so you know, people whinge. You say, well, you know, if you don't want to be here, don't be here, because this is what it's about. This thing here you're doing now is, if you don't like it, don't be here, because this is what it's about. And so you don't have to kick them out. You know, it's very clear that they sort of just don't want to do that stuff, and so they wander off. And so there's very little negativity. There's very little recrimination. So
you you had a symposium to address the legacy of, from Suzuki's perspective of his work. Have you thought about, or are you going to think about the legacy of the Frank Suzuki? You know.
Well, that's why you're interviewing me, and that's why I'm talking to you right now.
Where would you like it? Is there someone that you want to
I don't think that's doable. I think all of our actors are busy, doing their own thing, and the ones that aren't with us anymore are still very much taking the stuff that they learnt with us, digesting it in their own way, and they're quite successful outside in their own other careers, and so I don't think you can plan that much. There's a record of what we've done. We've got a training video. We've got all these discussions, which are part of the whole the wider fabric, and plus there's also the shows themselves. So we've moved into films recently because it's actually easier to do a film than it is to make a play. But essentially, it's a film theatre, so it's not that different.
Right.
But I guess that's going to be our legacy. You can never work out what your legacy is going to be. I mean, Suzuki was very keen to do this, or Mrs. Saito, I should say, was keen, because she was very keen to make sure that the Suzuki method was seen as a creative thing, not just a form of drill for making strong actors.
Right.
That's actually, it's a matrix, they're my words, but matrix for actually, for creating very interesting theatre in the way that he has done, obviously, in the last 40 or 50 years. And all of us around the world are doing that too. So there's an international system. The fact that we all come from such different places and believe in it, and have our own attitudes to it as well.
Right.
So one of the things, those essays that you've read in that book, show just how we are obviously availing ourselves of our own local variations.
Right, yes.
Also our personal attitudes, our personal predilections, our personal temperament of what we look for. So, and this thing's big enough to actually allow for all that.
Right.
Because it's not a style.
Right.
So, now I'm interested. We had a situation yesterday where we're doing the Kasai speech,
Yeah.
Kasai plus speech,
Yeah.
and at the very end of it, I said, shut your eyes, and then I said, open them again. You actually made some interesting comments about that, which I hadn't really broached, even though we do this eyes shut, eyes open stuff quite a bit,
Quite
because
frequently,
it's
yes.
it's quite a good tool for self-defining. But can you just share with me what you said, or can you remember what you said? Because it was quite a very profound observation, I thought.
Well, yeah, it occurred to me, like you said, you guys in various exercises at various parts, maybe towards the end, maybe in the middle of the exercise, you'll give the instruction to close your eyes for varying lengths of time, maybe really short, maybe and then you'll say open them again. So I've been experiencing this closing and this opening, and then it
just
really,
before I just say the reason we do, just before you go to that
please,
profound thing, the reason we do that is because when your eyes are shut, one, you have to feel the ground.
yes,
You have to feel the ground, and by extension, you have to feel all the other stuff as well. So if I'm touching Eric and I have my eyes shut, I've actually got to feel the ground first, so I can actually be stable enough to feel Eric, and then I've got to feel Eric. So this implies an incredible sense of greater feelings, greater sensitivity, born of not having your eyes open.
yeah,
And the other thing, of course, is that when your eyes are shut, you can't use your ego. I mean, isn't it interesting how when people are asleep, they really look beautiful? And that's because you don't see any ego there. You just see the person's self. It's just the thing. And so it's really dealing with those sorts of things where your eyes are shut. You actually have to really think very profoundly about yourself. And people's faces relax. They sort of lose that sort of enthusiastic demeanour, or that sort of wanting to please demeanour. They actually become themselves. So that's why we do it. But Eric had a deeper observation.
yeah. So every time the eyes close and then open, I realized something should or could change. Something has changed about you, about your attitude towards the speech you just said or about to say, about the room, about the audience. Things, when my eyes began to open after a time, things became more tangible to me. I just could, maybe I had tapped into this plasma or something, but it just occurred to me that when the eyes reopen, something has changed. Something has changed. and that place that I'm in when the eyes open, I'm sitting there like, oh, I wish I could be this way before I closed my eyes. How can I get to this place of
all the time
of this palpable air? This palpable. I mean, it's just something happens, or it should happen. I feel, that happens, and it's and hearing, knowing what it's about, and that you can feel the floor and this and that. I feel like there's both a technical element to closing your eyes, and the artistic one is that artistically something has happened.
That's right.
Something has taken place.
That's mysterious.
Very much so. I don't even know exactly what it is. I just know something has happened. I don't know what that something is.
No, that's right.
But
but we are agreed that something's happened.
Something,
that's
yes.
That's an interesting performative thing, isn't it?
Yes.
But say, that was amazing. We don't know what it is, but that was amazing.
Right.
And that's, in a sense, the greatest performances are like that.
Yes.
So,
yes.
I guess we say when your eyes are open, suddenly you discover the world for the first time. You could argue that that's the first time you've ever seen anything. So I suppose you're born again. You could argue you're renewed again. But the thing that I guess, one that struck me was actually the profound way you said that. It was actually quite an amazing thing to watch you saying even that speech. It was quite a performance in itself. But I guess the fact that you can have this different attitude, because I've never thought about it quite like that. But that's extremely valid, really. And although it's slightly different the way I thought, well, that's an interesting expectation or perception about something. So that even, it's something as simple as having your eyes shut can actually have a rather powerful effect on you.
Yeah. And it's just the nature of the repetition, where it just wasn't, something where it seemed, you went, let's close your eyes. Let's see what happens if you close your eyes. But something that it's inherently in the makeup of the Frank Suzuki, kind of world, and that, you guys have kind of.
I think that's a tool you could take anywhere, though.
But just the nature of just the repetition of it, that it would, and the repetition made me think and made me go, maybe investigate it.
Yeah.
Made me go interrogate it even more to say, this isn't just a fluke. Let's see what happens if you close your eyes.
Yeah.
But and whether or not you were trying to purposely or not, but I felt like there's something in this. There has, and maybe that's just the
expectation.
The person in me that just is like, there has to be a meaning behind this, behind this repetitive nature, and I think that attitude made me investigate and made me.
The way you spoke about it, you weren't thinking there must be you said that, but in fact it wasn't. It was very clear that something profound had happened to you, and you were speaking from that profound thing. So as much as you say that idea came to you, like it hit you like a bolt from the blue.
Yeah,
that really came from you, and it came from deep inside you, of course, because where else is it going to come from?
Yeah, it came from a felt experience.
Well, and of course the thing is, of course, with your eyes shut, you can't see. Oh, I've got this idea from over there. you literally can't see anything else, and that's sort of nature of what makes great performance, isn't it?
Yeah.
That sort of thing, and it's a combination of knowledge and mystery.
Yeah.
But it's a bit like when you do we do this rotation thing. You're sort of seeing the world for the first time, seeing so you're revealing it to yourself, and also by extension to the people who are watching you. That's quite profound.
Yeah.
So, any more?
No, I feel like that's a pretty good.
A good place to finish.
A good note.
Well, thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you so much. This was a pleasure.
It was a great pleasure. Once again to have you with us for 4 days.
Yeah.
Wonderful time.
Yeah.
Au revoir, dudes and dames. Ciao, ciao.